Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the office of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, U.S. Representative Office. And I want to welcome also those who are joining us live on social media. This event is broadcast on our YouTube channel at NCRI-US, but also on our Twitter channel, as well as our website. My name is IRGC Jafazadeh. I'm the Deputy Director of the Washington office of the NCRI. And what we're going to talk about today is actually, as the title says, Iran's sham parliamentary elections, what it actually means, if anything, what impact it has inside Iran, what impact it has outside of Iran, and what we should make of it, as well as what policies should be pursued in dealing with this process. So let's get to this very quickly. So there are actually two elections that we're talking about, starting about a week from now. That's March 1st. That's a Friday. But they started supposedly the campaign process starting today. And there are two elections that are taking place at the same time. One is about the Majlis, or the parliament, which is the 12th term now, and it chooses 290 representatives. It's for a 4-year term. And then the second one is the Assembly of Experts elections, if you can call them elections. This is the 6th term because each of them has 8 years term, and it selects 88 representatives for the Assembly of Experts. Now, already it's very evident that there's going to be widespread boycott of the elections based on all the evidence that we already have. First of all, most importantly, the Iranian people have been speaking through the street, through uprisings, through the protests, especially since 2017. There have been several rounds of major uprisings in Iran in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2022, and also 2023. And interestingly, starting in 2017, the main theme has been actually the chant of reformers, hardliners, the game is now over, which also translated to reformers, principalists, the game is now over. That was the chant. What that really means is that the people have entirely given up for long from the ballot box under this current theocracy of the mullahs, because it's a sham. It has no impact on the lives of the Iranian population. They are trying to change things in their hand. And another indication is actually the widespread purge. That is a clear indication that another clear indication that the elections, the so-called elections, are going to be boycotted. So let's talk about the purge. What is it that we're talking about? First of all, the purge has been widespread. What I mean is that preventing the so-called candidates, all of whom are very disobedient to the regime and to the supreme leader, purging them from actually to be able to even run on the and campaign for it and to be qualified. And among them, they called it purification process. This is a new term that they've been using in this new term of the elections, and I think that by itself the word is pretty clear. So those more prominent members who've been disqualified is actually the former president Hassan Rouhani. Everyone knows him. He was 2-term president, 5 terms as the member of the regime's parliament, and 3 terms as a member of the Assembly of Experts. He's currently, as we speak, he's a member of the Assembly of Experts, but he's now qualified to run again. And he was the secretary of the Supreme National Security Council. He was the top nuclear negotiator. He has been in the top security positions of the regime for the past over 30 years, yet he's disqualified. So that tells you about how hardcore Khamenei wants the people in his own gang, in his mafia gang. And then you have the former intelligence minister, Mahmoud Alawi, for 8 years, who was the Minister of Intelligence, acting in various positions, but also Mustafa Pur Mohammadi, another intelligence minister. He was also interior minister. He was a member of the Death Commission, the notorious Death Commission, that in 1988, along with Ebrahim Raisi, with 2 other members, were overseeing the massacre of 30,000 political prisoners, most of whom were members of the main Iranian opposition movement, the Mujahideen Khalq. Yet, when it comes to now the Assembly of Experts, he's disqualified because he doesn't fully comply and doesn't fit in what actually Khamenei is looking for. Now, are there consequences of the purge? For sure, there are consequences. First, it alienates former allies. You know, you saw some of the examples I mentioned, and the purge has been widespread. So you create some kind of nagging and dissent among your own circles. It actually, once again, re-emphasizes that there is no path to political change, that even the closest allies of the regime are not able to even run and get positions. So what change are we talking about through the ballot box? And then basically it reduces the regime's power base. All of these people have been defined as what the regime basically relies on, and now they have been sidelined. So with all these consequences, the question is, why the purge? Why would Khamenei get into this purge of the most loyal people who have served his system, served his regime for years? Let's take a look at the reasons. There are actually 3 main reasons that explains why the regime has gotten into this situation, why specifically Khamenei. First and the foremost, that's like the most important defining element in all of the process, is actually the fear of the resurgence of the uprisings and the activities of the resistance units. Because the uprisings are in a sharp contrast to the so-called political process under the system. The uprisings have been gaining momentum since 2017. Every time they emerged, they were a lot deeper, more focused on regime change. The slogans are a lot more focused on Khamenei and basically rejecting the entirety of the system, and they lasted longer. So the main fear that Khamenei has is that when is the next one going to come and how is it going to come, because they may not survive it. So they're building the whole system around preventing the resurgence of further activity, further uprisings, and B, countering it. And of course, the engine for those activities or those uprisings, engine for change, has been the resistance units. These are the units formed by the main Iranian opposition. The MEK consists of men and women, a lot of women among them, whose job is actually to ignite or lead the protests, ensure continuity, keeping them on focus, and basically confronting the Revolutionary Guards. Interestingly, the MEK announced that in about a year, over 3,000 members of the resistance units have been arrested or went missing. But they also announced that the resistance units have actually expanded. So there are more people joining than those who have been arrested or eliminated by the regime. So that's the main driving force behind all of the activities of the Iran regime. And second, with the need that the regime has to intensify and expand its foreign intervention, to expand its terrorism and warmongering in the region, which itself stems from the first element, which is the fear of its own population, the fear of its own people. And then the third element is the possibility of Khamenei's death. He's 85, and the successor, the chances that this new assembly of experts that has an 8-year term, the chances that they would decide the fate of the next supreme leader, if the regime itself survives by then, would be this assembly of experts. So that explains why the purge has been pursued by Khamenei despite the consequences. Khamenei basically has had no choice. He had to choose the worst over the worst. Now, this is the first time that there is elections, so-called elections for the Assembly of Experts after the uprisings have started. So that becomes a big thing. And as I mentioned, that they are trying to select the most hardcore clerics in the Assembly of Experts. And as you can notice in this picture, all of the members of the Assembly of Experts are clerics. And they have, supposedly they have to have certain qualifications that, mujtahid they have to be, like, certain qualifications among the clergy. But the interesting thing is that to determine who is mujtahid, because it's not like, you go and get your license, your PhD or something. Rather, it's done in the theological schools, in the clerical circles. They come into a consensus and elevate some elements among their own ranks. But in this case, they don't go through that route. They they bypass the traditional Shia seminaries, and it's the Guardian Council who determines who is actually among the clerics who is qualified to even get in that Assembly of Experts. And the Guardian Council, who appoints Guardian Council, is the Supreme Leader himself. So it's the Supreme Leader himself who determines who has the rank of mujtahid, that is qualified and can actually sit in that parliament to determine both to oversee the activities of him or to decide the successor for the future. So you can see how flawed this whole process by definition is. And of course, this whole process of the clerical system is flawed, is defective to begin with. And that's why the Iranian resistance, specifically the Mujahideen Khalq, the main Iranian opposition movement, the very first time that the constitution of the Iran regime was introduced, less than a year after the revolution, they boycotted that. They rejected that. They never endorsed it because of it's built in a most undemocratic way. It's built on the authority, absolute authority of the Supreme Leader, and it's undemocratic by nature. So let's look at the competition among the Assembly of Experts. This is very interesting. We put together this map of Iran that has all the 31 provinces. And for the 88 seats they have allocated, for instance, Tehran has 16 seats and the Fars province has 5 seats. Those numbers in the parentheses are the seats available for each province. And the numbers outside are actually the qualified candidates for that. And just look at the numbers by itself, you can see how real competition actually exists. Look at the East Azerbaijan province. Look at Fars province. For 5 seats, there are only 6 candidates that have been qualified. So basically, the Guardian Council or Khamenei has already decided who is going to be in the Assembly of Experts from which province. All of these provinces in red are what I call like non-competitive, meaning that there are not at least twice as many number of candidates as the seats are. And so you can see, like, you look at anywhere. Look at South Khorasan province. Interestingly, there's 1 seat there, but there are 2 candidates. Now, one of the interesting candidates there is actually Ebrahim Raisi, the current president of the Iranian regime. Traditionally, the former presidents run from Tehran when they want to get to this seat. This time, they brought him to South Khorasan. And originally, it was only 1 candidate, only Raisi. And then, it got into the media and everything, like, how in the world can you have just 1 candidate? And all Raisi has to do is just vote for himself. He would be in. He doesn't need any other votes. So they introduced somebody else. No one ever heard his name. I don't even know who that person is. And it doesn't matter, just wanted to make it like 2 candidates instead of 1 in South Khorasan. That's the way they wanted to ensure that Raisi, that is one of the people that the regime is relying on, will definitely get into the assembly of experts. This is how competition is actually defined, even with their own standards within the regime. Now, let's look at the regular parliament, the 4-term parliament. This is also very interesting, the way this whole process is shaping up. The reason I get into the process is that it's so important to understand that, because on the face of it, they're talking about elections, the vote of the people, voter participation. But in reality, it's a facade. It's not a real election, and everything is pre-designed. Look at the process of vetting that the Guardian Council has to vet every member who wants to run and either decide whether you can get on the ballot or you can't. But how in the world do they do it? There are 12 members of the Guardian Council, and you have like thousands of candidates. How do they vet them? Well, the vetting process is entirely done by the intelligence organization of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards. They are the ones who do it. But they have always had trouble like getting into details of things. Sometimes they got people on the ballot that they really didn't want it. So this time they changed the process, and I'll get to it. So it's the IRGC intelligence organization that is overseeing the election process. And then it's the IRGC that defines, like sets the ground for the Guardian Council, and all they need to do is just like say, okay, yes or no, and because all the vetting has already been done by the IRGC. Now, you know, this whole concept of election engineering that we talked about in the previous elections as well, that has become like a known element within the regime. This time, and every time it takes a different shape and form. This time, Khamenei has gotten involved heavily himself. For the past 2-3 months, all he's doing, just like basically campaigning about the election itself and trying to get people to participate and how important it is and all of that. This is about legitimacy and all of that. And he defined 4 key elements as the defining theme of the elections this time. He mentioned security. He mentioned the health, or you know, how healthy the elections is. He talked about the competitiveness, competition, and also the participation. Everyone has to participate. Now let's look at these 4 elements that he has been relying on, and what do they really actually mean? Well, in terms of the security, well, security means like they don't want anybody who is not totally conformant to the supreme leader. So basically, the IRGC's intelligence organization does the advanced vetting, and then they have created a new requirement that didn't exist before. And the new requirement is that 7 months before the elections, you have to file your papers electronically, supposedly to figure out if your papers are okay or not. But this way, they would know who the candidates are. And then it's closed. You know, you cannot, if you didn't file by that deadline 7 months before, you cannot add any new names. So the list of the candidates is in the hands of the IRGC intelligence 7 months before, and they have all the time in the world, in every town, every province, every place, to look at them, scrutinize them, everything, especially in an evolving situation, a country like Iran that you have had uprisings and everything. You know, maybe these people change sides, and, you know, from one faction to the other. They want to make sure they have the most updated situation there, not the things they knew like 3 years ago, 4 years ago about one person. So that process has actually given additional authority to the IRGC to vet the process and make sure that nothing, escapes them. No one escapes them. And then basically ensuring a tight control over the whole thing. Now, the health that Khamenei talked about, well, he is actually calling at the same time for purification, basically meaning purging anyone that doesn't comply, doesn't fit his circles, and then basically excluding all the troublesome individuals some of the examples I mentioned, even his own president, his own ministers, top minister. The Minister of Intelligence is a very, very key position within the regime. They are the ones whose job is to keep the system in power, to go after the dissidents, to identify any voices of dissent anywhere. Yet those two ministers of intelligence were disqualified. He wants people who are like 100% compliant with him. And so that's why, you know, that's how health is defined. And the reason he wants them now in compared to all the previous times is because of the sensitivity of the situation. The country is in turmoil. The society is boiling. There have been major protests, series of protests and uprisings over the past few years. And then in order to confront that, he has to resort to war and terrorism and warmongering policies in the region. So he doesn't want anyone who would be even slightly nagging about this and, you know, having ifs and buts. So he wants, you know, the most hardcore elements everywhere, whether it's the regular parliament or it's the assembly of experts. Let's talk about the competition. He wants to, at the same time, give this illusion that there is competition. There are so many competing voices. There are so many candidates. You have a choice to pick among them. Interestingly, this time, unlike all the previous times, they had more candidates in the regular parliament approved in compared to all the previous times. About 15,000 candidates have been approved. That's 2.5 times, almost 2.5 times higher than the previous times. But in reality, no one even knows them. These are only the people who are qualified to be in Khamenei's line, but they're totally meaningless, have no role whatsoever, no impact whatsoever, and it wouldn't really make any difference which one of them you would choose. And of course, they have, you know, they push for certain individuals. So this way, they give this appearance of competition, but in reality, because of those purges, it's less competitive than it has ever been. So it's an average of 50 candidates for each seat if you divide it by 290 seats. But it's, as I said, is totally meaningless. And then the participation. He wants, at the same time, he's doing all the purges and everything, but he wants the participation of everyone. Constantly talking about that you got to participate. This is sending a signal to the outside world, to the world arrogance, to the enemies of the state and all of that. Basically, he's actually one of the tactics they use. They increase the number of candidates, as I said, so they get the family members of those who are there, asking them. The main thing they ask those candidates is you go and get people to come to the ballot box. That's their job. And then, you know, deploying a mix of threats and incentives to mobilize for a vote. Interestingly, Khamenei even met with women and wives of the regime's own officials, urging them, this is just very recently, a couple of weeks ago, urging the loyal women of the system to go get your husbands and your children, bring them to the voting stations and get them involved in the elections. Interestingly, we have gotten a lot of internal reports, lots of publications, papers that are inside that are produced either by the Revolutionary Guards or by the clerical system that talks about where they're standing. They have their own consensus of, like, you know, the polls. They have the, you know, the feel of the society, and they're extremely worried that this time is going to be worse than the previous times. And just give you like some examples. Like this is one publication, internal publication. It's not public. It's not on the website. It's a representative of the supreme leader in the Revolutionary Guards, the director of political directorate of the representative of the supreme leader Revolutionary Guards about the elections. And then they're talking basically among themselves that basically the whole focus of their internal discussions is about the elections, and that how the legitimacy of the system is under a big question mark, not just among the population, because the population have parted ways with the regime long ago, but even among the inner circles of the regime. And here's another one, another internal paper that is issued and distributed among the clerical systems that we have obtained a copy of it. It's called Amvaj Alude, meaning like contaminated waves, and discussing like what are the things that are being said out there against the system. And almost all of those pages, you go through it, I just picked like one page, they're talking about the undermining of the legitimacy of the clerical system, that people are basically, among the seminaries, among the clerics, they're questioning the authority of the supreme leader. Now, having said that, what does this whole thing tell us when we look at things in the big picture? There is actually a deep state running in Iran. Khamenei is running a deep state in the country. This deep state is well rooted in the, they have the Bagher Ghalibaf, who is the head of the parliament, is actually, his background is a brigadier general of the Revolutionary Guards. Then you have Hossein Salami, the brigadier general, the top general of the IRGC. Then you have Ebrahim Raisi, the regime's president. And then it's the office of Khamenei that runs the whole thing. In addition to all of the ministries, in addition to all of the networks that they have in place, even the parliament, but who is actually running the show is Khamenei himself with his office, what they call the Beit. It's a very sophisticated network of operatives. It's not that he has like a few people, like a chief of staff and some individuals who give advice and all of that, but he relies on other institutions. No, he is running this whole network of the office, and there are several thousand of people who are actually employees who work at Khamenei's office. And even though nominally the son of the supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, he has no official role. His position is never mentioned as anything, but in reality, he's the one who is running the office. And Khamenei, by not giving any assignments to him to create any kind of track record for him, he's just like holding him close and keeping him for a possible succession. And then the Khamenei office has the full backing of the IRGC. So it's this deep state that decides. And as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to the parliament, when it comes to the assembly of experts, when it comes to the future of the regime, when it comes to every single institution in the country, every single ministry, they have their own representatives of Khamenei in that institution. In every branch of the military, whether it's the regular army or it's the IRGC or the Quds Force, in addition to all of the commanders they have representatives of the supreme leader there. So that's how this deep state is actually operating, making it practically impossible to even think about a change. And that's why, despite all these talks about moderation, this face comes like every few years, there has never been any change to the country. The regime has basically, getting hardcore increasingly. Now, in terms of the IRGC and the parliament, because that's the issue that we're talking about today, there are documents that have been revealed recently that shows and how the IRGC and the Basij force basically have substantial influence over the parliament, how it operates in terms of both in terms of activities, but also in the content. There are over 3,000 members of the Basij who are actually affiliated with the IRGC who work in the parliament, in different parts of it. This is the IRGC running the parliament. This is in addition to the IRGC who are sitting members of the parliament. As we speak, there are at least 10 members of the regime's current parliament who, with the rank of brigadier general or higher, and the rest are, there are other Revolutionary Guard members. But this is in addition. This is how they're operating the whole show. Look at this document that is dated November 1st, 2022. This is shortly after the September 2022 uprisings. That was September 16th. This is just a few weeks after that. It's signed by the Hossein Irfanian, who is the head of what they call Harasat, which is basically the security apparatus that is created in every institution in the country that is consisted of the combination of the IRGC and the Ministry of Intelligence, whose job is just overseeing everything. And then the head of Harasat, which is in reality is IRGC, he has written this letter to the Ghalibaf, who is the Speaker of the Parliament, basically saying that there is a need for them, the members of Harasat, the IRGC people, to sit in the meetings of each committee meetings, commissions meeting, when they discuss smaller groups. They want to be present in every single meeting because they say that we are concerned, we need to have control because things are leaking out, things are, we want to know what is being discussed. They don't even trust their own members of parliament after going through all of the process, all of the purge, all of the vetting process. This is how afraid this regime is, how unstable this regime is, and this is pretty recent. And then they're controlling the communications among the parliamentary members or those who work in the parliament. Look at this another document here. The date is September 26. That's 10 days after the death of Mahsa Amini and the protest, the uprising started. Again, it's written by the Hossein Erfanian. As I said, he's the head of the Harasat, to Ghalibaf, basically saying that they want to get the phone numbers of every single member of the parliament or those who work in the parliament and giving it to the security apparatus, different institutions, to monitor them, to make sure that they're not involved in the protest. They will not participate in the These are sitting members of parliament of the regime. That's the level of control they have, but also it shows the fear that they're afraid that the discontent is actually spilling into their own parliament. And as I said, look at the date. Now, in terms of the population, the people, as I said, they're totally rejecting the whole process. But some of the documents that were surfaced recently showed that the parliament members get very high salaries. The salaries they get are about 15 times or 20 times higher than 15 times higher than engineers, 20 times higher than teachers in Iran. And these parliamentary members, I mean, they have no specific qualifications. And in addition to that, they get all kinds of other additional things. So what this has done, that has created even more divide between those who are sitting in the regime's parliament and the population, who are facing tremendous economic hardship. The very foundation of a lot of these protests were actually economic hardship, the corruption, how the money is basically controlled by the guards and others. Now add to it the members of the parliament. And then here's another letter. Look at the date, February 21, 2023, asking for additional funding for the IRGC, and they're quoting what the Supreme Leader had said. This is a letter from the intelligence security of the IRGC, directly writing to Ghalibaf, who is the Speaker of Parliament, saying, we had a meeting with Supreme Leader. He said we needed more fund, and he said you need to implement it. So he's writing a letter to him, give us the money. So it's like the money machine there that, you ask the IRGC, you get the money, because the Supreme Leader has said there's no real process of that. This is in addition to all the budget that has already been allocated to them. So basically, what's the parliament? It's really a rubber stamp in the hands of the Supreme Leader and the Revolutionary Guards. They're designed to fund their terror operations, their activities in the region. They're designed to fund their activities in the sea, endorsing their repressive policies. Take a look at this new also letter. Date is November 7, 2023. That's exactly 1 month after the October 7 attack in the region. And it's the letter written to the attention of Ghalibaf, signed by Mohammadi Golpanighani, who is the chief of staff of Khamenei, basically saying we have a new policy that we're going to implement. And that new policy is basically centered on maritime activities, it's going to be the center of our activities. So it's going to be in the sea. And then asking him to implement it, and then sending a copy of that. You can see this handwriting here. But this is Khamenei's own handwriting, his own signature on the plan, and basically saying these are the general policies for expansion in the sea. And the item number 1 right here, it basically says, interesting, it says the formation of unified policies on maritime affairs, assigning national responsibilities, rapid and effective management of the sea to maximize the utilization of the maritime potentials to gain prominent global role and be the supreme dominant force in the region. If I want to translate it in regular thing, what does that mean? It means terrorism, okay? We're going to spend money, and this falls in line with exactly what they've been doing with the Houthis. It just didn't happen by itself. And look at the date. That's the date that you saw the Houthis waging those attacks there. Basically saying from now on, we're going to have a lot more emphasis on maritime activities, gaining dominance in the region, more money for the proxies that operate in the sea, in the Red Sea, and the Houthis and others. So, and that's going to be the dominant thing. So let me wrap up and conclude. What does this whole thing mean? Basically, the March 1st elections, so-called elections, it's really a sham. It's going to be boycotted by the vast majority of the general public, as they have done before. The reason that Khamenei has waged a widespread purge, the most important thing is basically the fear of the resurgence of the uprising. That's like what he's been thinking day in and day out. And then also to intensify terrorism, as you saw the documentations, how they're going to put more emphasis on their terrorism in the region and all that, and then thinking about the succession. Now, basically, we talked about the deep state, how this regime is run by a deep state controlled by the Supreme Leader Khamenei, and he wants to ensure that this process remains the same even after he's not alive, provided that this regime survives actually the fear that they have, which is the uprisings and the change. And basically the IRGC plays a prominent role in implementing all of that. And then it's the office of the Supreme Leader that is running the show. And also we talked about the parliament, how meaningless their role is. Their role is basically to create a legal and political cover for all of the activities and actions by the regime internally and externally. And Khamenei, because he's been rejected by the people throughout these various protests, he's stepping up support and in terms of money and funding and training and everything for their proxies in the region. So what should be done? What should Washington and other countries in Europe and other places do? Well, now is the time that they build up pressure on the Iranian regime, hold them accountable for all of their terrorism, their weapons of mass destruction, for the chaos that have been creating in the region, but also for the suppression of the people of Iran. And in terms of the population, this is the time for the United States. This is the time for Europe. This is the time for the whole world to recognize the right of the people of Iran, who know all of these things, who have rejected this system as a whole years before, and they want to bring about change. They want to overthrow this regime. So their right to bring down the regime must be recognized and be allowed to continue to do those operations until we have a free Iran. So I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to leave it open to questions that you may have here or online. Please.
What kind of grade would you give the Biden administration?
Could you please speak to the mic so they will tape it? Yes. Yes. Can you please? Yes.
Hi. What kind of grade would you give to the Biden administration for their work thus far in the last 3 years of supporting the Iranian resistance and trying to hold the administration there to power? Or
Well, I think,
What do they need to do?
right. I think this information that we shared today, in addition to all the other information we have shared in the past, clearly shows that this regime is all about keeping itself in power by relying on terrorism abroad and suppression inside the country. Whatever that has been happening in the region, it did not happen by accident. It did not happen overnight. This is part and parcel of the policy of the Iran regime, the way this regime has been built. And I think not understanding this, to be more accurate, not taking these facts into account would lead you to taking positions that at the end of the day would become counterproductive. Whatever intentions people may have in Washington, Republicans or Democrats, this regime, you need to deal with them decisively, firmly. You need to hold them accountable for their crimes against humanity. You need to hold them accountable for their terrorism that they have done in the past, not threatening that if you do the terror attack again, we're going to do this and that. No, this regime has been involved in a whole host of terror operations over the years. You don't reward terrorists. You don't give them money and resources for releasing the hostages for which they should have been held accountable for holding those hostages, rather than getting rewarded for that. So all of that, those kind of actions would actually encourage the regime to pursue and continue those activities, those terrorism. And the only way you can force them to back down is for them to feel that there is a price for it, that they are actually paying a price for their terrorism. Look at the whole history of the past 3-4 decades. Every time the Iran regime has gotten engaged in terrorism, hostage-taking, whether it was Lebanon or other places, they got rewarded for it. And, you know, different administrations tried to reach out to the Iranian regime and finding a way of searching for moderates to see how they can deal with it, you know, give them something that they want. It dates back to the Iran Gate affairs, like, you know, in the 80s. This perception in Washington about the regime and about the realities on the ground in Iran has to change. And it has to change in a way to corroborate with the realities on the ground. The realities on the ground is Iran is a nation that, you know, 85 million plus, who in large part have rejected this regime. They want this regime out. And these protests, these demonstrations, the organized resistance, all of it, what does it mean? It means this regime is unstable, is rejected by its own population, and the outside world, all they need to do is just like accept this reality, as I said earlier, recognize the right of the people of Iran for change. That's all they need to do. There's no ask for money, there's no ask for arms or anything like that. There's no ask for boots on the ground, none of that. Only political understanding. Thank you, Mark. Any other question? Okay, so we're going to end the press conference here, and we're going to be available to talk afterwards. Thank you very much for coming, but also for those who are online. We appreciate following us. Appreciate that. And we have a copy of my presentation that we can share with you. Thank you.